ESPN proudly announced that the 2025 finals opener between the New York Liberty and the Minnesota Lynx drew nearly 2 million viewers, calling it the most watched finals in almost 3 decades. It sounded like a turning point, a historic moment where the WNBA finally broke through to mainstream relevance. But within hours, that dream unraveled. Fans started digging into the details, analysts began asking questions, and suddenly the league's so-called milestone started looking less like a victory and more like a carefully constructed illusion. ESPN's numbers claimed an average of 1.9 million viewers and a peak of 2.5 million. They splashed it across headlines, framing it as proof that women's basketball had arrived. But there was one massive problem. Nobody was talking about it. No trending hashtags, no viral moments, no clips lighting up social media. The supposed cultural phenomenon had left no footprint at all. For a sport that thrives on visibility, the silence was deafening. That's when people started to realize something didn't add up. When fans and analysts tried to verify the numbers through Nielsen, the trusted source for television ratings, they hit a wall. The actual raw data wasn't available anywhere. Instead, ESPN had referenced something called Nielsen estimates, conveniently keeping the detailed figures locked away. In other words, they were grading their own paper and expecting everyone to believe they aced the test. For a network built on credibility, the optics were disastrous, and buried deep in the fine print was the real smoking gun. Nielsen had recently rolled out a brand new measurement system called Big Data Plus Panel. On the surface, it sounded advanced, more comprehensive, more accurate. But when analysts looked closer, they realized this new system didn't just count active viewers. It counted anyone near a screen showing the game. That meant people sitting in bars, travelers walking past airport TVs, gym goers on treadmills with muted screens, even hotel lobbies with ESPN on in the background. Anyone who so much as glanced in the general direction of the broadcast got counted. Someone could spend 10 seconds waiting for their food with the game on a TV across the room, and they'd still count as a viewer. The so-called record-breaking audience wasn't made of passionate fans. It was made of passers-by. Then came the comparisons. Analysts began pulling up the numbers from earlier in 2025, during Caitlin Clark's playoff run with the Indiana Fever. Those games had generated real, verifiable viewership that dwarfed these supposedly historic finals. Fans tuned in not because of marketing manipulation, but because they genuinely cared about Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the Fever's rise. Those were authentic audiences, millions of people making the deliberate choice to watch. The finals without Clark, on the other hand, couldn't attract the same energy. The contrast was brutal. The league's biggest star had been sidelined with injury, and without her magnetism, they were left scrambling to fake momentum. The suspicious timing of Nielsen's big data rollout didn't help. The new system launched just before the finals, almost like someone knew the WNBA needed a miracle headline. For longtime sports media veterans, it was too convenient. Some even called it the most blatant case of manufactured success they'd ever seen. ESPN, which has a direct financial stake in the WNBA's visibility, had every reason to push the narrative. They weren't just covering the sport. They were invested in its survival. But you can't fake cultural impact. You can't conjure real passion out of spreadsheets. Fans noticed the disconnect. If these finals were truly record-breaking, where were the viral plays? The post-game debates? The highlights lighting up timelines? Even ESPN's own talk shows barely mentioned it. That silence spoke volumes. You can't claim to have millions glued to their screens when social media and mainstream sports chatter act like nothing happened. The term ghost watchers started trending, mocking the millions of invisible fans who supposedly tuned in but left no trace. Meanwhile, real WNBA fans, the ones who buy tickets, stream games, and follow players like Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham, were furious. They'd watched genuine momentum build over the past year, only to see the league risk it all for one fake headline. How do you claim record-breaking viewership when arena tickets for finals games were selling for $6? When broadcasts showed empty seats? When sports radio didn't even mention the results the next morning? The league's attempt to force a narrative had blown up in its face. Behind closed doors, the mood wasn't any better. Sponsors and advertisers, who base million-dollar decisions on these metrics, started demanding answers. If those viewers weren't real, then neither were the ad impressions or the projected engagement rates. A few executives reportedly called it fraud by optimism. Whether intentional or not, the WNBA had undermined its credibility with the very partners it needed most. For a league already struggling to prove profitability, this could be devastating. The irony is that the WNBA didn't need to fake anything. The growth brought on by real stars like Clark and Cunningham had been authentic. Fans were genuinely tuning in to see their talent, their chemistry, their competitiveness. But the league's leadership couldn't be patient. They wanted another historic headline, even if it meant building one out of smoke. And now, they've handed critics exactly what they wanted. Proof that women's sports are still fighting for honesty in a world obsessed with optics. The league's response has been predictably tone-deaf. Instead of owning up to the inflated metrics, officials have released vague statements about modernizing viewership measurement and adapting to the evolving digital landscape. ESPN has gone quiet altogether. That silence is its own admission. They're hoping this controversy fades away in the news cycle, but fans aren't letting it go. You can't lie to the internet and expect it to forget. The worst part is how this scandal cheapens the real progress women's basketball has made. Players like Clark and Cunningham have proven they can draw legitimate national audiences. They've shown the sport doesn't need gimmicks, just stars, stories, and competition worth watching. But when executives prioritize artificial success over authentic growth, they drag the entire league backward. They make every honest milestone look suspicious. In the end, this isn't just a numbers scandal. It's a trust scandal. Fans trusted ESPN to tell the truth. Advertisers trusted the WNBA to deliver transparency, and both failed. By counting background noise as viewership, they turned real support into statistical fiction. They mistook proximity for passion, and that might cost them everything. The truth is simple. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA still hasn't figured out how to hold America's attention. And instead of accepting that challenge, they tried to cover it up with data manipulation. That's not growth, and that's desperation. And in sports, desperation always shows. What happens next could reshape the league's future. If advertisers pull out, if networks demand real numbers, if fans lose faith, the WNBA's fragile momentum could collapse overnight. They could have taken the honest path,